Hi, everyone. My name is Moria Robinson, and I'm a postdoc at Michigan State University in the United States. I'd like to thank the organizers of this conference and Mara Sobral for inviting me. It's really an honor to be here, and I can't wait to watch the rest of the videos and hear the other stories of all these amazing women in ecology. So a little bit about my background. So I did my PhD at the University of California, Davis. I worked with Dr. Sharon Strauss, and I studied the effects of different soil types that naturally vary in Northern California on structure of multi-trophic networks. So I was interested in how these different soil types, which are characterized by different levels of resource availability, affect the traits of the plants that are adapted to those soils, and how that then in turn affects the feeding structure of the herbivore-plant interaction. After my PhD, I went to a postdoc with Will Wetzel at Michigan State University, where I am now. And for that postdoc, I've been working on kind of a different direction, a little more applied. So I've been looking at domestication selection and how humans have altered plant traits over evolutionary time through the process of domestication, and in particular, how we've altered the variability of plant traits within individual plants. So actually looking from leaf to leaf within plants, if the characteristics of those leaves are more heterogeneous in a domestic versus a wild plant, or the reverse, and what the effects of that might be on insects in crop systems. I'm also really interested in anything and everything to do with caterpillars and moths and butterflies. So another project I'm really excited about right now is looking at the macroevolution of coloration in caterpillars and how the host-plant relationships between different moth and butterfly species can affect the evolution of their coloration as caterpillars. And I thought for this talk, I would focus a little bit on my childhood, actually, kind of my earliest steps on my path in ecology, and some of the first, I think, images and influences that made me question how I could be a girl scientist. So I grew up in Washington State, near Seattle, in the northwestern part of the United States. And if you had been walking around on that island sometime in the late 1990s, you might have seen a little girl with big glasses, short brown hair, carrying a butterfly net, running around in the neighborhood looking for butterflies. And that was me. I had loved insects for as long as I could remember, and I was particularly obsessed with butterflies. I'd gotten a butterfly net from my grandpa when I was 10. And I read a book called Chasing Monarchs by Robert Michael Pyle, where he talks about following the trail of the monarch migration through California down to Mexico. And I got really inspired to get to know all the local species in my neighborhood, which in the Northwest, in rainy Seattle, is not very many, which meant it was a nice, tractable fauna for a kid. So I made data sheets where I would record the species and the date. And for many years of my preteen years, I would be out with my net, catching butterflies, writing down notes about them. I loved that, and I was sure that I would do that in some way for my whole life, in the clarity you have when you're a small child. Not even that small. And, that's normal when we're small. We aren't thinking or overthinking our interests, and we aren't thinking that anything is weird. And then, as happens in high school and adolescence, things get a little more complicated. And I think that's where sort of the imagery that was around me of, what a scientist looked like, what it meant to be a career-driven woman, what it meant to be, sort of less than that. All of those ideas and stereotypes, I think, really started to come into play in high school, both from, the surrounding culture and from my own family. So on the one hand, and this is also a product of sort of the feminist dialogue at the time, I think, there was a lot of pushback, and at least in my community, against these stereotyped images of women that we would see in commercials and on the media. So, smiling, very social, with, their body being in full, in some amount of view, probably selling some object, razors, vitamins. It's amazing the things that women can sell on TV. And so there was sort of this idea that this was not the direction we wanted to go. The better direction was to be, kind of different, or, the imagery of the nature girls I had were girls who were, loners by themselves, not, taking pride in the fact that they kind of were doing their own thing, not wearing makeup. And I think, in the absence of having images of career-driven women, scientist women, for whom science was a part of their life, but they also could take pride in their appearance or have a particular way of looking that was more similar to this stereotyped female. That was something that was in a lot of tension for me in high school. And I also got some of that from my family. So my family was very focused on me following this scientific path. And, I got clear and implicit and explicit messaging about, spending time with the quote unquote nerds was better. But if I was spending time with women who were dressing in a more revealing way, this was high school. Everyone was exploring these parts of themselves, and trying to figure out who they were and how much of this was because of what other people were telling them versus what they really wanted. This is just a really challenging time in life, right? But, I got that signaling also from my family, this is the right way to go. And if you have these characteristics, you're somehow more set up for success, chase your butterflies, be a loner. But if you're social and if you're, going to these social events and these parties, no matter how safely, somehow you're on the path to, being less focused on your career and less successful. As I was writing this and thinking about what to talk about, I was thinking, gosh, this seems so petty. This seems like such a small thing. But at the time, I remember that it did cause me a lot of insecurity and a lot of tension about how, I love science, but to be a scientist, it seems like I have to be this particular kind of person that doesn't mesh with these other parts of myself that I'm figuring out and really enjoying. And I can also remember when this really changed. So I was 15 and I just gotten a scholarship to go spend 10 days in the Arizona desert with a group of other girls and what ended up being 2 women grad students who were leading this group. It was with the Earthwatch program, which is a really wonderful program and organization. And I remember going there and we spent 10 days out in the desert. We were at a research station in the Chiricahua Mountains. For most of the other girls, we were 5 girls all together between 13 and 15. For many of us, this was our first time out of our hometowns. This was our first time definitely in an environment like the desert. You're getting sweaty, you're getting dirty every day. It's hard work. You're spending a lot of time looking at insects. And, for some of us, this was also the first time we'd spent a lot of time collecting or handling insects and thorny plants. It was a big experience for us at that time in our lives. And I think one of the most amazing things was seeing these 2 women who were leading the group and how completely excited they were about science, and how they were also they could have been your sisters, they could have been your teachers at high school. They were so accessible, they were so available, and they so clearly had no tension between being social, getting dressed up to go out to dinner, going out into nature, into the field to collect insects, talking about their families, their friends, all of these parts of their lives were together. And being a scientist was a huge part of that and something they loved, but it wasn't their entire identity. And at the same time, it didn't cut them off from other parts of their identities. So I think this really helped me see, the importance of having role models and having people you can see yourself reflected in is so incredibly important. And that's something that I think is getting more discussion now, certainly, the importance of having diverse people in positions of leadership and leading labs in STEM and ecology. And of course, I've worked now with multiple undergraduate students and been able to sort of see this from the other side, where I've had many young women come and ask to do independent projects or to work in the lab. And I see that, there is a difference in how comfortable young women are coming to me than to some of my male colleagues. And, this is not good. This is not what we want. We want people to be able to feel comfortable going to any mentor that can be in that role for them based on shared interests and based on connection that is separate from anything about our identity, right? That's the goal. But the reality is that for many people, and this is not only based on gender, but this is any identifying characteristic that anyone has, where society is telling them they're less able and less fit to be in science because of that part of themselves. For anyone experiencing that, which is most young people, it's just going to feel better to surround yourself with examples of success where you can see yourself in that person, And so I think, part of this prompt was, how has being a woman in science marked you or shaped your path in science? And I think a major way it has is in making me more aware of the importance of that, of having many different kinds of people representing science at all levels. And also the importance of my own community and my own network of women in science who help me keep my energy up and my motivation high, as all of us are in some way dealing with the realities of being a woman in science. Even if we don't experience some event that makes us feel like, oh, that was because I'm a woman. We're all living in a statistical reality, which is that we know if we go and give a seminar, some number of people in that room are going to immediately think that our work is less interesting or less novel, simply because we are going up there and we are perceived as being women. And that's not a fun reality to live with. But I would say that one of the ways that I've been able to kind of put that into a much smaller part of my mind is by having a really wonderful community of women, a number of friends from graduate school where we still keep in touch. And we talk about how we're coping with issues of diversity in our own institutions, what we're doing to change that, and being a sounding board if any of us are going through any challenge related to our gender or not. And I think that has been so incredibly important and something that conferences like this and the good side of Twitter can really foster are those communities and those support networks where we can bounce ideas off of each other and we can be there to support each other. And also to bring in people of all different genders and all different identities who need to learn more and want to learn more and want to learn how to make science more inclusive for everyone.